On a quiet Ohio porch, a brother met his sister's boyfriend carrying backyard zinnias and a lemon loaf, not knowing that simple kindness would tilt 3 futures. This isn't scandal. It's a story about honesty, porch lights, and love choosing the right home. For grown hearts, handled gently tonight together. Stay, subscribe, and share this channel. Your support helps thoughtful, heart-safe stories reach more people who need gentle company each week. Hello, friends. Pull up a chair, grab a warm drink, and take a breath with me. This is a porch light story, the kind you can listen to with your heart set down beside you, knowing it will be treated with care. It's about 3 adults, my sister Grace, her boyfriend Daniel, and me, Noah, finding our way through truth without breaking what didn't need to break. Live on Elm Street in a small Ohio town where the grocery clerk knows your dad's physical therapy schedule and puts oranges aside for him on Tuesdays. Dad had knee surgery late August. The doctor called it routine, but when it's your father, every step looks like a miracle you're trying not to take for granted. Grace planned a trip home from Chicago to help, and in the same breath she told me, "Hey, I'm bringing someone. His name is Daniel. He's kind. You'll like him." You always like the good ones? The day they pulled up, the sky was a blue you don't get every day. Like the town had ironed it flat just for us. I was sweeping the porch. Dad was inside pretending to watch baseball, but really resting. I heard the car doors, then Grace's laugh, this bright, generous sound that makes your shoulders relax whether you want them to or not. Grace came up the walk in a sundress and sensible shoes, sunglasses perched on her head like she meant business. Behind her, a man set the car lock with a beep, then rounded the bumper carrying flowers. Not florist fancy flowers, but backyard zinnias tied with twine. He also had a bakery box looped with string and a paper bag that later turned out to be full of oranges. "Hi," he said, and smiled with his whole face. "I'm Daniel. For the record, because it matters in a story like this. We are all grown." At that minute, I was 28. Grace was 31. Daniel was 33. The only things we wanted from each other were kindness and the truth. It took us a while to realize the truth we owed ourselves. But we got there. I brought them inside. Daniel offered the bouquet to Dad's living room like it was an apology for being new. "For your recovery room," he said with a small shrug. "And oranges because my grandmother swore they can't fix anything, but they help everything. Dad loves a man who comes bearing oranges." He shook Daniel's hand with both of his and gave him that look fathers use when they want to measure character without a ruler. Daniel passed the test by not trying too hard. He asked where to put the vase, tied the bakery twine in a loop for reuse, and got out of the way when Grace started rearranging the coffee table because she's never met a flat surface she didn't think she could improve. We made pot roast, because when people are nervous, they should do what they know by heart. I pulled out Mom's old recipe card, the corners soft from years of being pinned under a flour tin, her handwriting a little loop of home on every line. The scent of searing meat and onions filled the kitchen so completely, the house seemed to remember something important. Daniel asked if he could chop. He tucked his fingers under properly, kept the carrot coins even, rinsed the board without being asked. He was careful in the way that comforts you. Dad dozed, then woke to marvel at how the roast smelled like it had something to prove. We ate at the sturdy oak table where every big conversation in our family has happened. Victories, losses, new jobs, the year the fridge quit the night before Thanksgiving, that afternoon when I told Dad I was gay and watched him take a breath and then ask if I still wanted chili for dinner. "That table holds the truth and doesn't wobble. Where are you from?" Dad asked between bites. "Cincinnati," Daniel said. "Bengals fan by birth, so I'm no stranger to heartbreak." Dad chuckled. "Man who can survive that can survive anything." They talked football. Grace asked about Daniel's work. "I'm an architectural designer," he said. "I draw and model things for firms. Sometimes the drawings become places where people live and laugh and stand in the light. Sometimes they live in a drawer and teach me something anyway." I liked the way he said that. There was no puffing up, no apology, just a steady, honest kind of hopefulness. If you were watching closely, you might have seen my shoulders loosen. If you were inside my rib cage, you might have felt a dog alone on its leash just beginning to tug, and me saying, "Hush, not here, not now." After dinner, with the game murmuring in the living room, Dad napping like a man who earned it, Grace on the recliner scrolling for hotel check-in emails, I stepped onto the porch to let the cool dusk settle me. Daniel followed, careful to leave space like he'd been taught the right size of his presence. "Do you want help with dishes?" he asked. "We do them in waves," I said. My stubbornness meets Dad's stubbornness in the sink, and they fight it out. "You're a guest. You get porch breeze and a pass." He leaned on the railing, watching the maple leaves tilt to catch the evening. "This is a good porch," he said. "It's hurt a lot," I admitted. "Like what?" "Everything that matters," I said, and left it there. We were quiet long enough that the crickets tuned up. He glanced at the framed photo visible through the kitchen window. Mom, late summer, hair piled up, laughing mid-sentence in her red flower sundress. "She looks like someone who would show up with soup," he said. "She had a recipe box that could outrun a blizzard," I said. "Also a way of making people feel seen that doesn't come with a recipe card." "She'd like the flowers," he said. "She'd like the oranges more," I said, grinning. He smiled back, and the smile reached the corners of his eyes in little commas. There, right there, something inside me recognized something inside him. The feeling wasn't fireworks. It was a porch light turning on, steady, not begging for attention, just offering it. I slept on the couch that night because Dad likes knowing someone is within earshot when he stands up in the dark. As the house breathed, I looked at the ceiling and set a rule. A real one, not a pretend one you make so you can feel noble breaking it. "He is your sister's boyfriend," I told myself. "Be kind, be decent, be still." The week slid into a rhythm. Grace and Daniel divided their days between our house and her friend's place across town, with 18-month-old twins who thought Daniel was a jungle gym. We found reasons to put the kettle on, and reasons to go outside and inspect the sky, and reasons to bake. I learned too much about Daniel in a way that didn't feel like I was learning anything at all. He kept his car neat because his father's truck smelled like oil and work lunches, and he missed it like a second home. He read cookbooks for stories, not just recipes. He listened to Dad like he might try the advice later, not like he was collecting wisdom for sport. One afternoon, a storm came in from the west like a sheet closing. We moved the porch plants in and settled into what the house does best, waiting together. Grace fell asleep with a book upside down on her chest. Dad snored from the recliner exactly the way his father used to. Daniel and I played gin rummy at the table, and he lost with such good humor that I almost felt guilty for winning. Almost. I wanted to ask 1,000 questions I had no right to ask. Instead, I asked for the normal ones. "What's your favorite season?" "Autumn," he said. "My birthday sits in a pile of leaves." "Same," I said. "Except you'll never catch me raking on the day. I let the leaves have their party," he laughed. Then he looked out the window in that way people do when they're collecting courage. "I like how it is here," he said. "Your house, your dad. Your sister being herself without performance. It's good. It's real," I said. "When Mom died, we made a pact. No acting. We're not auditioning for each other. We're just going to be who we are and trust love to stick." "I haven't always trusted that," he said softly, "but I'd like to." I felt something in my chest shift in its chair, but I kept my face how I keep it when I need to calm a dog. Gentle, easy. The county fair arrived. You could smell it from our front steps. Kettle corn, hay, hot engines. Grace insisted we go. Dad declined with a wink, promised to behave, and then asked us to bring him back a corn dog he wasn't supposed to have. We walked across the grass and into the glitter of evening. We played 2 rigged games, lost twice, laughed anyway. We bought lemonade that hit the back of your throat like a memory of childhood. We rode the Ferris wheel because that's what decent people do when the fair lights come up against the sky. Grace grabbed the next car. Daniel and I sat side by side. When the wheel climbed and paused, the town spread like a map. He rested his hands on the bar. There was no dramatic music in the background, just the real sound of night and a girl down below screaming for no good reason other than that she was happy. He breathed out slow. "Can I tell you something without you having to do anything about it?" He asked. "You can say anything," I said. "I can't promise I'll know what to say back. But I'll be honest." He looked at the horizon more than he looked at me. "I care about your sister. She is She is goodness. And I'm learning that goodness needs to be matched by the right truth. Mine has been complicated. I haven't always known how to be honest with myself about who I want to come home to. I've tried to be what seemed right. I'm tired of trying to be and ready to be. The wheel creaked. The car swayed a bit. My heart rose and sat back down in the same motion. I'm not asking anything of you, he continued quietly. I'm not asking for secrets. I'm not planning a drama that would embarrass anyone. I'm just... He closed his mouth like the word just was too small for what he needed. I am telling myself the truth slowly, and I think it wants a life, I nodded. Thank you for trusting me with that, I said. I will hold it gently, and I won't take what isn't mine. He let out a breath like a man who'd been holding one since he was 19. The wheel stopped to let people on, then carried us down, then up again. The fare did what fares do. It made the impossible feel normal for 10 minutes. The next morning, the kitchen felt like a waiting room for a conversation. Grace poured coffee and cradled the mug in both hands like heat could give her courage. Do you like him? She asked, eyes on the maple outside, not me. I do, I said, steady. Me too, she said, and smiled in a way that made me want to cry and didn't make me cry. I've been in rooms where people wanted me to knit them a sweater out of my patience while they figured themselves out. I'm not interested in being anyone's project, but I'm also not a door someone has to slam to learn how a handle works. Does that make sense? It does, I said. More than you know, she glanced up. I see how you two listen to each other, she said. There's a way your shoulders relax when he starts talking about buildings that carry light. There's a way he looks at you when you tell Dad's old baseball stories like they were front-page news. I'm not blind, I'm your sister, I swallowed. I haven't... Grace, I wouldn't... I know, she said, holding up a hand. You don't have to prove decency to me. I have watched you be decent my whole life. Here's what I think. I'll walk with him. We will talk. If the truth we both deserve includes you, then I will bless it and set it gently on your porch with a note that says handle with care. And if it doesn't, I'll bless that too. You are something else, you know that? I whispered. Mom raised us like that recipe for her rolls, she said. Lots of rising time. No rushing. That's what makes them good. They took a long walk at sunset. The sky turned bruised plum. I sat with Dad on the porch listening to a game we weren't paying attention to, and nothing about that hour was normal. It was ordinary the way a heartbeat is ordinary. The door opened. Grace came back in first, kissed the top of my head, sat across from me, and inhaled like a swimmer touching the wall and turning. We were honest, she said, eyes soft, not swollen. He told me he's been kind to himself by halves and wants to be kind in full. I told him I like him in a way that will last even if the shape changes. We aren't a mistake. We're a beginning that taught us what beginnings feel like. We decided not to keep walking as a couple. Dad watched us the way fathers do when they're in a room with tenderness they can't fix or protect. He reached for her hand and for mine at the same time. Somehow his big hands managed to hold both. And you? I whispered. I'm okay, she said truthfully. There's a relief I wasn't expecting. Turns out not carrying a thing that's heavier than you are is nice. Daniel followed a minute later, stood on the steps, hands in his pockets, not knowing where to put them. I'll give you all some space, he said. Thank you for being the kind of people who make telling the truth feel safe. He left for the hotel with a nod. We didn't build a melodrama out of the evening. We ate leftover pot roast and watched Dad pretend to like the low-sodium gravy. We stacked dishes without clatter. I lay down that night with the odd feeling that a room in my chest had been aired out and swept. Autumn rolled in for real. Grace went back to Chicago, where her life fits like a coat she chose. Dad started outpacing his cane. I spent Saturdays at the library where I work, putting up flyers for a new supper for one cooking class idea my neighbor Mrs. Whitaker had been nudging me toward. She's 72 and moves through town like good weather. Her advice comes wrapped like a quilt you didn't know you needed. One afternoon in late October, I found her on the bench outside the post office sipping tea from a thermos with daisies on it. You look like a man carrying something wrapped in brown paper, she said. Still heavy even if you can't see what's inside. My sister's boyfriend, I said, because we talk in headlines with each other. And your heart, she said. My heart, I admitted. They untied their knot kindly. Now everything feels possible and impossible at the same time, she patted my knee. Good people at unfortunate angles, she said. That's half the stories I've loved best. You'll do fine. Keep your feet moving, keep your mouth honest. Keep your hands to yourself until the moment you're asked to do otherwise. I laughed out loud into the cool air, and it felt like breathing. Daniel and I didn't become a story overnight. We didn't become anything, not right away. We sent small texts, the way decent people do when they are letting something find its shape. He'd send a photo of a building with windows that looked like they could sing. I'd reply with Dad's latest joke about his physical therapist being the only person in town tougher than him. He sent a snapshot of a cookbook page for molasses cookies and wrote, "Would your mom approve?" I said, "She'd suggest you add orange zest just to keep the theme." December arrived on soft snow. Daniel texted, "Driving to see my sister. Passing near you. Can I drop off something for your dad? If timing's bad, I'll leave it with Mrs. Whitaker. She's been angling to be the postal service." He came by. He stood on the porch in a navy pea coat that looked like it had watched a lot of winter. The tin in his hand made the right sound when he tapped it. "Molasses cookies," he said. "From your mom's card, as interpreted by a man who reads instructions twice." "Also," I told my mother and my sister. "Everything?" I asked, hearing my pulse in my ears. "Everything that matters," he said, eyes warmer than the air. My sister said, "Okay, Uncle Daniel, same Lego for the kids as usual." My mother cried in the way mothers cry when they realize they should have been carrying part of your bag all along. Then she hugged me hard enough to reset my bones and asked if I wanted roast chicken or pot roast for dinner. "Roast chicken," I said. "Good for beginnings." "Roast chicken," he agreed and smiled. We poured coffee from a thermos into 2 cups and let the steam make poetry in the air. He leaned beside me at the railing, not touching, not pressing. The snow put a lace edge on the banister. The maple looked like it was listening. "What do you want?" I asked finally, out where the cold could keep us honest. "I want to go slowly," he said. "I want to do it right. I want to tell the people we love the truth the minute the truth is real. And I want to make soup with you on Tuesday nights without the world needing to call it anything before it is." "That sounds like a plan," I said, surprised by how relieved I felt. It wasn't relief that ached. It was relief that steadied, like standing on new boards you built yourself and realizing they don't creak. We picked a day to meet in Cincinnati, where he lives. That first date wasn't fireworks and confetti. It was coffee that tasted like someone had thought about it. A walk by the Ohio River while the wind told us to keep our scarves on. A lunch at a diner where the waitress called me honey and him sweetheart in that equal opportunity way that makes you feel you belong. He showed me a model of a community center he was sketching. Light wells and long tables and a kitchen designed so people could cook together without bumping elbows. I talked about the library cooking class, how men show up with old grief in their grocery bags and leave with soup in a container and a promise to come back. At sunset, in a quiet parking lot with salt underfoot, he said, "I would like to kiss you, only if you would like to be kissed." "Thank you for asking," I said, and meant every syllable. He stepped close enough that I could smell coffee and winter and something clean. He touched my arm like people touch old wood they respect. The kiss was soft and sure, more like lighting a candle than setting off a sparkler. I didn't see stars. I felt a room in me get warmer. We drove home carefully because Ohio roads in January can be trickery, and because neither of us wanted to rush a day that finally felt like ours. Telling Dad was easy in the way that takes 20 years to earn. He was chopping celery for a stew, his contribution now that he likes an excuse to stand, and I said, "Daniel and I are seeing each other." He set the knife down, looked at me, and nodded like a man who already knew, because he knows me. "He's a good one," Dad said. "Be better. That's the trick. Find a good one and then be better than you were." Telling Grace was like settling a blanket over our knees on a cool evening. I called her, voice steady. "Hey," I said. "I wanted you to hear it from me. Daniel and I are trying this." "Good," she said without hesitating. "I like when the right people find each other. I like knowing I wasn't a detour. I like that you're choosing to be brave in the ways that last." "Are you okay?" I asked, because that is what you ask when the bridge you're standing on still matters. "I'm good," she said. And then told me about a book club she'd joined and a neighbor's dog she was walking temporarily because kindness is contagious. Also, when you have him over for dinner, please don't make him chop carrots for old time's sake. Make him rest for once, we laughed. Then we made a plan for her to visit in February when the roads were kinder. Daniel and I became a steady part of each other's days by doing the steady parts together. We did laundry with an almost loving attention to the socks that lose their partners. We split grocery carts and discovered we disagree on which apples are baked best. He says Honeycrisp. He is wrong, but I have learned to share a pie with a man who is wrong about apples. We ran the Men's Tuesday cooking group at the library. 9 guys around a folding table, all of us peeling potatoes like we were uncovering something worth finding. Daniel taught the quietest man at the table how to crush garlic with the flat of a knife, and the look on that man's face when the aroma bloomed could have been a painting. On Sundays, we called our parents. He set his phone to speaker and let me listen to his mother tell him about the neighbor's new porch light with the same care she used reporting the weather. Sometimes his sister's kids yelled in the background about Lego pieces. Sometimes Dad wandered into my living room, sat down mid-call, and talked to Daniel's mother like old friends do, cheerfully nosy and entirely kind. We told the truth when it was hard in the same tone we used when it was easy. There was one week in March when work and obligations put us on opposite sides of an argument that wasn't really about the argument. It was about time, how we spend it, who feels left out when it's scarce. We raised our voices, which neither of us does well. We took a walk in opposite directions just to feel our feet under us. We came back. We said we were sorry. We said thank you. I set a plate in front of him with an orange in the middle like a peace offering. He laughed and cut it in half. The first time Daniel came for Sunday dinner as my boyfriend, Dad wrote place cards like it was a holiday. Grace pulled into the driveway that same afternoon with a pie she bought, not made. "I know my strengths," she said, handing it to me. "They are in good taste and generosity." Mrs. Whitaker accidentally timed her walk to pass our porch right as we were carrying food to the table. We invited her to sit as we always do. The evening felt like the best kind of small-town church potluck, everything humble, everything full of love. We stood before eating, not to make speeches, but because Dad insists the first minute at a table sets the tone for the hour. "Bless the hands," he said, short as always, "that made this and the hearts that will enjoy it." We enjoyed it. We told the same old stories because they're the tracks our laughter runs on. Dad told Daniel about the day he met my mother in the school hallway when a pipe was planned to be replaced, and the replacement took 3 hours longer because my mother kept stopping by to check on the progress. Every time he tells it, he uses that phrase and rolls his eyes with love. After dinner, we sat on the porch with mugs of decaf that fooled nobody and watched the neighborhood settle into evening. Grace took a picture of Dad, me, and Daniel on the swing. "You're going to want this someday," she said. "It's exactly the right amount of happy, quiet, and whole." Spring found us. The maple outside the house put on its new dress. We planted tomatoes in containers because Dad missed having a garden, and Mrs. Whitaker promised to supervise with expertise she claimed, but did not actually have. Daniel spent evenings drafting a community center proposal that made my chest tight with hope. He talked about people moving through light like it was a friend, about doorways wide enough for every walker and stroller and bruised heart to fit through without turning sideways. I stirred soup while he talked and realized that love sometimes sounds like a blueprint read out loud in a quiet kitchen. Grace's life bloomed in Chicago, too. She met up with old friends, joined a weekly trivia team, she's undefeated in the bird category, and sent postcards like it was 1987. One with a drawing of a Ferris wheel arrived in May with the message, "Next September, I'm cashing in my corn dog. Tell Dad to save me a seat on the porch." We had our first weekend away in June, a short drive to a town with a Saturday farmer's market and a bookstore that sold pie by the slice. We held hands on sidewalks where nobody knew us and discovered that peace tastes the same no matter where you eat it. He let me choose the jam, strawberry rhubarb. I let him pick the cheese for our picnic even though his taste skews toward the adventurous. We sat in the park and people watched, and talked about the complicated gift of making a life. That is yours without forgetting the people who helped. You find your way. The only truly dramatic thing that summer did was give us a storm big enough to name, and all it knocked out was the power for a night. We lit candles and read to each other from a cookbook like it was a novel, beating the eggs one at a time, letting each find its way. And the sentence made both of us quiet in the best way. You might wonder about jealousy, about grief, about the what-ifs and the why-nots. The truth is, when we hold a story carefully as it unfolds, those things have their place and then they sit down. There were moments, standing at the sink while the house was quiet, when I felt a small ache that we hadn't met at a different angle on the map. And then I remembered that the angle we did meet at made us into the kind of people who could do this well. Grace did not recede from our lives into a shadow called the past. She remained exactly who she was, my first teammate, my favorite sparring partner, my anchor point on family maps. She visited when she could. We visited her when we could. We teased, hugged, sent pictures of grocery store flowers with the caption, "Thought of you." We were all better than fine. As summer tipped toward its finale, Daniel and I stood one evening on the porch after getting back from visiting his mother. He had painted her guest room a fresh, cheerful color that made the morning brighter. She had made lemon bars with a dusting of powdered sugar that got everywhere. She hugged me without a second of hesitation, and then recruited me to carry boxes like she'd known me for years. The sun was fading. The first crickets took a breath. I never knew life could be this gentle, he said, voice low. It's not always, I reminded him. But we've earned a lot of gentle, he nodded. I used to think big gestures would save me. Now I think it's the small ones at the right time. A week later, near dusk, he reached into his pocket while we sat with Dad listening to a ball game and the soft squeak of the porch swing. He looked at me the way he does before he asks for a kiss, a question, not a demand. In his palm was a simple band, nothing shouting, everything meaning. He didn't kneel. Not because we don't believe in tradition, but because our tradition lives on a porch next to a maple tree, where standing side by side makes more sense. I don't have the perfect speech, he said, the smile in his eyes steady. But I know the life I want, and it looks like this. Coffee you make too strong and pretend is perfect. Tuesdays with soup and men learning to chop an onion without fear. Phone calls with your father about porch paint and baseball. Road trips to Cincinnati, where my mother asks if you want another helping, because love is an extra helping. I want to be the person you watch the weather with, and the person who turns the porch light on when you're late. Will you be my home? I didn't cry like in the movies. I felt something older than tears, something like a bell ringing once in a chapel where everyone already knew the answer. Yes, I said, simple as setting a plate down. Yes, Dad cleared his throat and said, we'll need another chair, which in our family is the same as congratulations. He stood, hugged Daniel, hugged me, and looked up at Mom's photo inside the house. I reckon she's clapping somewhere, he said. She always liked a good ending and a better beginning. We called Grace. She was in a cab. The driver grinned at the chaos of our speakerphone shout. About time, she said, and then laughed and cried and promised to visit as soon as she could and bring the fanciest pie in Chicago as if pie could be. Improved. Mrs. Whitaker appeared on the sidewalk like she was choreographed. By kindness, and hugged us both without asking what for. It's about time, she said, which seemed to be the official theme of the evening. We sat out there until the light turned all the way down and the crickets found their full volume. A neighbor walking her dog waved. Somebody 3 doors down played an old song low enough that all it did was gild the air. If you're listening and trying to figure out how to be one of the good ones in your own story, I don't have step-by-steps, but I can tell you what worked for us. We kept our promises, even the ones we made in silence. We did not take what wasn't ours. We asked permission. We apologized quickly. We said thank you even quicker. We trusted the ordinary days to do the heavy lifting. We put oranges in a bowl and pot roast in the oven and the truth on the table and trusted everyone we loved to pick it up. A year later, the county fair came around again, as it will do whether or not your heart is ready. We bought lemonade and stood in line for the Ferris wheel. Grace met us at the gate, her hair up, her eyes bright, wearing a sweatshirt that said Ohio like it was an invitation. We rode up and looked down at the same small town that somehow always looks new from above. People were still winning rigged games. Kettle corn still made the same sound freshly popped. A little boy in a blue cap had blue ice cream on his nose. The world hadn't changed, and it had. When we reached the top, Daniel squeezed my hand, and I thought about the first time we had sat there with a different question between us. Now the question was gone. Not because life had given us all answers, but because we had chosen our questions carefully and let them lead us home. Back on the ground, we bought Dad his contraband corn dog and took it to him like a trophy. He pretended to protest and then devoured it with the joy of a man who has outlived worrying what people think about sodium. We ended the evening on, where else, the porch, where everything good in our little world has a seat. Grace raised a glass of sweet tea. "To not rushing," she said. "To being brave in the right direction," we clinked. Porch lights up and down the street flicked on, as if the neighborhood had decided to provide a standing ovation. We didn't need it, but it was nice. If you're someone who worries about timing, about right and wrong doors, about the long hallway where you can see a life and don't know how to walk toward it, I hope this story gives you company. The best parts of ours were easy to miss while they were happening. They were quiet. They were steady. They were the sort of moments you don't brag about to strangers because you'd rather save them for the people sitting under a slow fan with you, passing the sugar and talking about the day. We kept the porch light on. We still do. We leave it glowing for neighbors and late arrivals and anyone who needs a landmark. It's a simple promise. You're welcome here as you are whenever you're ready. And when you step onto the porch and shake off the weather, we'll meet you with what we have: supper, a chair, a story told without hurry, and a love that has learned the measure of itself.